you can't focus, you're not alone. Sometimes it feels like no matter how much willpower I have, no matter how little I actually enjoy it, I can't resist just one game of chess or 5 minutes on TikTok. And then I feel so guilty when I see 4 hours of screen time on a good day. But as someone who grew up on video games, it can be hard to let go of such an important part of my life. So, what if I told you that productive people consume content in a way that is fundamentally different and they don't even know it? I learned to be less anxious, more productive, and build a healthy relationship, even with gamified products, as an adult. It's thanks to the gaming motivation scale. But to learn what that is, we need to step back and understand games. Welcome to the show. My name is Kevin. Our main story tonight concerns games, also known as those things that you never lose, and if you did, the other guy clearly cheated. Specifically, we're going to talk about gamification, which is when you take other stuff and make it into a game. For example, Boy Scouts might get a badge if they walk their grandpa across the street. Task plus rules plus reward equals game. It's a simple formula if said Boy Scout badge doesn't involve flying to the South American wilderness in a house lifted by balloons. But it may not surprise you to learn this is also a trendy and effective way to get people to do what you want, as shown by one quaint little social experiment.
In China, where the web is heavily censored, a new social credit system called Sesame Credit rewards and punishes citizens for what they do and what their friends do on social media.
And I cannot tell you how disappointed I was when I couldn't find a TikTok social credit dance. TikTok is getting banned, and this is why. Come on, my Roman Empire is the systemic gamification of compliance. This is the lowest hanging fruit. Now, make a game out of it is an easy way to make it more fun or engaging. You knew this when you told your brother, whoever does the dishes fastest wins, and then, oh, sweetheart, you let him win. But not all things should be fun, tracked, and scored. Example number 1 being compliance to the fucking government. People play games like Pac-Man, Tetris, or Pinball for hundreds, if not thousands of hours without thinking twice. That is dangerous because it doesn't have to be a shiny yellow ball eating slightly smaller, slightly shinier balls. When it is compliance, it is something we should deeply understand. Gamification, or arguably addiction, is a trillion-dollar industry rooted in finding ways to convince you to do shit without thinking about it. And if everyone understood that, we may not get stories like this.
In the US, companies like Facebook here in California have created a perfectly addictive product by appealing to our emotions and our circle of friends. But in the process, they've also inadvertently created a way for geopolitical enemies to reach across to each other's citizens using some of the most advanced marketing tactics in the world.
That's right, America number 1, you really thought China had us beat in gamification. By the way, what I love most is how the most advanced marketing tactics in the world is just adding fucking Fortnite to everything, because a Beef Boss skin wasn't a sign from God himself that we've had enough. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're welcome. Now, you may think this isn't a big deal because gamification in some form has been around forever. Boy Scouts added badges you can earn in 1908, but honestly, I'm sure a caveman once said, "I'll give my rock to whoever can wrestle that lion the longest." Gamification is important to talk about now because addictive gameplay loops have never been so popular, so profitable, and mostly so psychologically leveraged as in the past 20 or so years.
Candy Crush is the latest in a long line of games that follow the maxim, a minute to learn, a lifetime to master. Previous examples include Angry Birds, Tetris, even Twister. The idea here is that Candy Crush gives players an immediate sense of accomplishment.
Delicious. I really am actually enjoying it. It's really fun, and it's something to kind of, have fun with my daughters.
My nerd weakness, I'm going to say it on TV, Settlers of Catan. I love it. I'll pay anything to play it on my iPad. All right, well, back to the real business here. Heather, you are a CEO of a tech company.
Excellent, excellent, excellent reporting. One small critique. A minute to learn, a lifetime to master. Twister. Is there competitive Twister? Are there 3,000 ELO Twister masters? Magnus Twisterson who can beat Bill Gates in 12 seconds or less with right hand green at just the wrong time. And yet she's right. Games aren't new. But there is a huge difference between Craig pulling out a Twister mat to make every girl at the party uncomfortable versus a game of Candy Crush, which is indistinguishable from the random sparkly bullshit you might see at a casino. And I know that because this isn't Candy Crush, and don't lie, you didn't realize. The 2000s basically introduced social media, loot boxes in video games, and much more. Articles about gamification were picked up by Forbes and the New York Times by the 2010s, which is how you know it was trendy in the 2000s. If that was 20 years ago, what on earth might they be doing now? Let's start with some basics. A game feels like it can mean almost fucking anything. One definition says a game is a structured type of play, usually undertaken for entertainment or fun. Fun. Key components often include goals, rules, challenge, and interaction. So, tic-tac-toe, tag, Fortnite, blackjack, RuneScape, a scratch-off ticket, sports that one time you bet your buddy that anyways isn't a real word. Jesus Christ, I'm sure he's a game somewhere too. While that all sounds incredibly vague, as if a game could be actually anything, it's a surprisingly useful definition, because a game starts when you shift your perspective. It's about choice. I'm not running away from my friends in terror of their very touch. I'm playing tag. Why? Because I agreed to play tag. Imagine how terrifying it would be if you didn't agree to play hide and seek when a stranger bursts out of your cabinet and screams, "You found me." Games are opt-in. It's called consent, which is why it's a terrifying norm that everyone must sign a 60-page terms and conditions document anytime you sign up for fucking anything. Because when a company, government, or person forces you to give your consent, that's not how consent works. In fact, let's take a field trip back to the 2000s. You have an Xbox 360, your friend has a PlayStation 3, and you just agreed to fight to the death to decide which is better. Meanwhile, true story, instead of either, I got Call of Duty Black Ops for the Nintendo DS because it was the only one rated T instead of M. Fuck you. Back then, you may have heard news stories like this.
Real money lost in a virtual world, a world set in medieval times. It's where an 11-year-old like Timmy, he spent years gaining a high level in an online game called RuneScape. In just minutes, Timmy's password was hacked, stolen, his account with all these points and belongings emptied out. You may be thinking, who cares?
That is exactly what I was thinking. Thank God for your hard-hitting journalism. If you're going to cover every waking second of the Trump trial, that is the way to do it. But in short, Timmy got his RuneScape account hacked, and thus his family lost money. The news portrays the answer to who cares as Timmy's family, because they lost $140, and that is awful. But what's being glossed over here is that the fucking victim is Timmy. The family spent that money knowing full well it would be wasted on a virtual world. They spent the money. That's what spending money is. The news doesn't say, I restored my dad's car, then the car was stolen. Who cares about cars? But the thing is, I understand why this news story was presented like this. To this day, it's an endemic problem that the news doesn't think you'll care about video games or Timmy unless there is real money at stake, as opposed to fake money, which must be based on something like, I don't know, the gold standard. Look, video games are a multiple $100 billion industry that I would argue has influenced almost every part of the digital world at this point, and they've done so relatively under the radar, off the back of people saying who cares. It was just 7 years between Timmy's story and the earlier one about how Facebook uses the most advanced marketing techniques in the world. So maybe, just maybe, when Timmy's sad about the pixels on his screen, instead of asking who cares, we should. There are 1,000 complex questions here we could discuss, and yet we have to relate the story to money to get an average person to empathize when the most advanced marketing techniques in the world are used on an 11-year-old child, which, to be clear, games still are being used on children. That is what they are. Which is why tonight it's time to talk about games. Why they work, when should we take them seriously, and what should we do when everything is games. And a good place to start is to talk about winning. Winning feels good. That fact alone is a key part of what makes many people addicted to games. But going deeper for a moment, many games or companies also have a specific value tied to winning their game. If you win at chess, you feel smart. If you get likes on Instagram, you feel popular. If you win an Olympic gold medal, you feel like a freak of nature. And while you may say, but Kevin, Olympic athletes are different. I clearly deserve 10,000 likes for my blurry concert footage on Instagram, and that is so much harder than getting a gold medal. You're right, stop posting that shit. This is the 7th concert you've gone to this month, and they all look the same. Happy Olympics. But psychologically, as different as these scenarios sound, they are an achievement tied to a specific value. At risk of being redundant, this isn't a logical meaning, it's an emotional feeling. A kid might not actively think they are accomplished by making their woodcutting level go up in RuneScape by clicking a picture of a tree, but you are doing it because it makes you feel good. And when winning feels like you are smart, you are popular, or you are accomplished, losing and reactions to it start to make a little more sense.
How? I missed 3 fucking hits in a row, man!
Mom just canceled my brother's World of Warcraft account.
Their reactions actually make marginally more sense if you remember they bought into multiplayer games, the goal of which is to occupy thousands of your hours. Companies have figured out that if you can instill a sense of pride and accomplishment, yes, that EA Reddit post, at just the right ratio, you can keep players coming back for more. How do you prove you're not dumb? Is there another instant gratification way that tells you you are smart? No. So you'll play another game of 3-minute chess to prove yourself right. I mean, in my experience, the people who have the most fun in a game often play like dog shit. And this can be a problem, especially when we market instant gratification games to kids, or as we now affectionately ruin them, iPad kids. Because ignorance is bliss. And these kids won't understand any of this if they're not told. They understand playing games feels fun. Yet, studies show that giving kids screen time screws with their ability to learn to regulate their emotions. In the moment, these video games stimulate the brain. They put a kid's nervous system into high gear, increase their heart rate, blood pressure, floods their brain with dopamine, with heightened stimulation. The visual motor areas of the brain light up, the reward pathways are reinforced by the dopamine, and the moment that, say, a parent interrupts that pent-up energy, all the kid feels is a sudden and out-of-nowhere stop to all of it. Of course, he gets mad. Of course he does. 2 seconds ago, he lived in a dreamland of magical adventure. Now he gets none of that and a whole lot of family time. But also, video games absorb you into a world where your senses are so assaulted by flashing lights and do-or-die game scenarios that survival mechanisms kick in, which sets off a fight-or-flight response, increases cortisol, the stress hormone, and long-term, it induces chronic stress that short-circuits the frontal lobe to mentally deplete the kid, which makes it hard to focus. Truly sounds like my Dota experience. I mean, think about it. When you design an artificial obstacle that a kid will beat every 2 minutes on the dot, of course they don't want to feel dumb for half an hour while they memorize the geography of the United States. But what's crazy about this research is just how many things you can apply it to, because adults often engage in less obvious and only slightly less toxic feedback loops. Because on the one hand, many modern games and gamified platforms are a place for low effort but immediate low reward feedback loops. They give you just enough reward to keep coming back. That's the point. Games are designed to convince you that something is low stakes and fun, but sometimes they aren't low stakes and they aren't so fun.
More than a third of elite athletes report dealing with depression or anxiety. Kevin Love got candid after a panic attack during an NBA game. And swimming star Michael Phelps battled post-Olympic depression. Mental health experts say elite athletes often face unfair expectations.
We equate success with health. It really is important for us to work to understand the person and not just reduce them to their performance.
Exactly. Understand the person. Don't reduce them to their performance. This is just me spitballing, but games seem like an evolutionary, low-stakes way to practice before you get chased by an actual tiger. You play tag, or you spar before an actual battle. But now, we're tricking people into thinking it's practice, when it is the thing. Compare elite sports, like the Olympics, to Robinhood, an app that gamifies investing. You play with your life savings. Except if you fail at this game, you lose your house. My point is, at even the Olympic level, understanding your motivation for playing matters more to your mental health than achieving some win. It's so important to separate the game and the emotions from the action and results. If you actively choose which feedback loops to engage with and actively say to yourself why you do it, you'll save years of your life when you wouldn't have spent them chasing dreams that you realize there's nothing past the goal you set. But even if you do that, what you might get tricked by is something called abstraction. For example, RuneScape, a picture of a tree. If you click on it, your character will pull out an axe, or really, pixels will show a little animation of the character pulling out a picture of an axe to cut said tree. And after that animation, you'll gain what RuneScape names woodcutting experience. A picture of logs, and the picture of the tree will change to that of a picture of a stump. Now, replace that picture of a tree with an empty black box. Take away your little character avatar, take away the animation while he cuts the tree. Take away the picture of logs that appears in his inventory. Take away the name woodcutting and turn experience into a number. Increase that number by 1 instead of 3.7 when you click on the black box. Congrats, you're counting. I bet you find none of the things I just listed inherently valuable to you, and yet when I remove them, it feels a lot less worthwhile. All I did was I removed the layers of abstraction that trick you into playing for 10 hours while you feel productive. You might think, well, I would never fall for that. To that I say, first, the owners of RuneScape, Jagex, just sold for $1.1 billion. It works. Second, fine. Take the popular game Elden Ring. You are not improving your reaction speed to Melania's attacks. This isn't Final Fantasy XVI. No, you are memorizing the boss's attack animation. It's the same fucking thing. You may still love the look, the music, the community, the story, the ambiance, or escapism, but it's important to ask yourself, if this gameplay, the core of a game, merits 1,000 hours. That is a personal question different for each person, but it is important to ask. And if you can't articulate why you play, or you get defensive, that's a big reason there used to be so much stigma against games. Yes, back in the day, Gen Z, Roblox wasn't cool. It was like someone who makes fun of Love Island while they watch tennis. I'm obviously watching for thick thighs that can crush my head like a watermelon, and you're not watching tennis, you're watching Love Island. Of course, there are some other pretty objectively good reasons to play some games.
Gamification may work long-term after all. When educational content is disguised as a game, it's known as a serious game, and they're growing in popularity. But in terms of entertainment, they can't compete with commercial video games. They have the most money behind them, which often means better design and more fun. So can they be used for teaching? Educational researchers are currently testing whether Mario Kart could be used to teach probability. Age of Empires is being tested in history lessons.
2 words. Fuck yeah. Mario Kart. Now, to be clear, this is not a done deal waiting to be implemented. Importantly, there are questions of what actually sticks. Which game design elements promote learning? Are these games implicitly teaching bad lessons? And funding. But the fact is, kids are already learning from media and games already. They learn their morals from TikTok, politics from House of the Dragon, and product market fit from Roblox. When I was little, I fortunately or unfortunately learned all about the stock market and scams from the Grand Exchange on RuneScape. Yeah, that clicky waste of time game. If we don't use gamification to teach our kids, someone else will. And rather than use games to manipulate people into doing what a billion-dollar company wants, we can use them to strategically incentivize what we already want. So why hasn't anything been done? Well, I'll give you a hint, and it almost rhymes with accomplice. Congress. It's Congress.
Well, if so, how do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service?
Senator, we run ads.
How does that show up on a 7-year-old's iPhone who's playing a kid's game?
Congressman, iPhone is made by a different company and
reduce the amount of
No,
data.
are you willing to change your business model in the interest of protecting individual privacy?
Congresswoman, I'm not sure what that means.
Well, I'll follow up with you on it.
Those were a few clips from the congressional hearings with big tech CEOs over the past couple years. Not so funny until you pay attention to the Google CEO's face for a moment.
How does that show up on a 7-year-old's iPhone who's playing a kid's game?
That is the face of restraint. And also my face over Zoom when this whole thing could have been an email. Every few years, we get a big hoopla where Congress pretends they even vaguely understand something tech. And every time it happens, I play a fun little game called Stupid or Malicious. And everybody loses. Clearly, they recognize the need to ban something like TikTok, but not because of its gamified addictive structure, it's because the gamified addictive structure was not made in America, to the benefit of American corporations. But maybe those American corporations are doing something since, their entire business model is based on psychological fuckery. They now hold massive influence over tiny things like US elections. Yeah, I bet they self-regulate in the interest of the public good because that's what billion-dollar companies do, right? Well, I remember one story when Instagram stopped showing likes for the good of the public.
You'll still be able to like posts, and the owner of the post will still be able to see the number of likes, but followers will not be able to see them. An Instagram spokesperson said this will put the focus on the photos and the videos that people post as opposed to just the sheer number of likes.
And that sounds great, until you find out that 2 years later, Instagram found that removing likes didn't meaningfully depressurize Instagram for young people or anyone else, which is a conclusion you could have come to only through a 2-year study or asking fucking anyone. The fact that this has been their most meaningful attempt to regulate this kind of addictive design is, to be frank, fucking obvious, when the only ones in a position of power who regulate or understand this kind of thing, they seem to be the businesses themselves. Companies don't do things that aren't in their self-interest. Take the video game industry, the scapegoat of every mid-parent for the past 30 plus years. You might think that makes them an easy target. One of the most obvious fixes should be loot boxes. Loot boxes are an item in a video game you can buy with a random reward inside. A gun you can use or a costume your character can wear. Emphasis on random. So, game companies, what say you to such rampant, obvious gambling?
Loot boxes, broadly speaking, have gotten a bit of a bad rap. The game mechanic of buying something that you're not quite sure what's inside is as old as baseball cards, as an example. And so what we believe, for example, at Nintendo, is that a gameplay mechanic that offers the consumer something to buy that they're not sure what's inside can be interesting, as long as that's not the only way that you could get those items. It's one of many mechanics that we can use to drive ongoing engagement in the game.
Oh, they get a bad rap. They do? Oh God. I had no idea. I haven't been a supportive friend. I've just been focusing myself. It's just... Wait. Did you say loot boxes are interesting because it's not the only way to get those items? When you gamble, you typically earn something called money. Are you aware? Buying Mega Millions scratch-off tickets is not the only way to... How does Nintendo pay you? Now I'm imagining some fucking CEO with 1,000 scratch-off tickets. Shit, lost again. Send it to Bob. Tell him his kid's gotta skip dinner tonight. Fuck. But that's the excuse. We've done this for years. Don't start the buck here. Also, what's interesting is how he uses the word interesting and not healthy or safe. Nobody was worried that loot boxes aren't interesting. I'm not a journalist, so maybe I can say it's interesting how that kind of language avoids liability. But video games don't matter, like the news guy said. Who cares? Maybe somebody will care when it's our money at stake.
That said, Gary Gensler, President Biden's pick to run the SEC, has said he's going to address the gamification of investing as one of his top priorities.
I think what they'll find is gamification is poorly defined. It's not happening on Robinhood.
So on the point of gamification, your confetti animation, that confetti that pops when users make trades, this is something that you've defended, but now Bloomberg has reported it's something you're thinking about potentially getting rid of.
Well, I should say I'm a bit surprised by how much attention the confetti animation has gotten. You'd think from reading some of the commentary that confetti's flying through the app all over the place.
You've lost $10,000. But the NFT of Discount Dracula here is right. Do we want to live in a world where we can't celebrate with confetti? Environmentally, yes, but more importantly, where's the line between fun versus problem? I mean, the line is definitely before the use of celebratory imagery tied to the frequency of trading, push notifications highlighting specific lists, and features that mimic games of chance, given that Robinhood settled a lawsuit for $7.5 million and stopped doing exactly that. So the line is somewhere. But where? Because it should be clear at this point, there needs to be a line, a concrete principle we can defend that is immune to new technology that pops up, and suddenly none of our current laws matter because this isn't the stock market, it's called crypto. Pump and dump schemes are totally fine. And comprehensive legislation like this is possible. We do have anti-gambling laws, but they don't consider even loot boxes gambling. It's actually been companies like Epic Games who chose to settle class action lawsuits despite decent legal arguments in their favor. Some say good for them for drawing a line in the sand. But also, all it takes is one loss in court, one set precedent to open the floodgate to future lawsuits that may actually matter. Consider that Epic Games, yes, the same company, literally just won an antitrust lawsuit in 2023 against Google's App Store. All you need to know is that this win caused a domino effect that may massively impact the way their App Store works, and Google also had to pay a $700 million settlement with the 50 states, arguably as a result of this case. So, Epic Games might just be aware of the impact of losing, not settling, a loot box lawsuit. They've been a thing since 2006. Loot boxes could vote this year. As crazy as it sounds, we're entering that age of life where judges might actually understand what a loot box is. Side note, if you're a millennial and just realized that people born in 2006 are now 18, yes, you are old. But catching these companies in court takes years, while massive harm is done to players' mental health. Meanwhile, the company can just add a layer of abstraction and earn microtransactions by marketing the same techniques in a slightly different way. It's not a loot box, it's a loot llama. That is a real thing. Now, some companies have been punished. Fortnite had randomized loot boxes called loot llamas until 2019 and settled a lawsuit about them by 2021. They paid out 1,000 V-Bucks to 6.5 million players and 2.5 million Rocket League players, though, again, they paid out in V-Bucks, one abstraction away from money. And then they also offered a way to argue for an actual refund. Later in 2022, Fortnite settled for $520 million this time for privacy-invasive default settings and deceptive interfaces that trick Fortnite users, including children and teenagers. So I feel like they were less doing the right thing and more moving on from loot boxes from the bad press. And while $520 million sounds like a lot, I'm sure you can predict where this is going. Fortnite makes $26 billion every fucking year from microtransactions. And while it would be nice for Congress to act, you could also put that exact phrase on a bumper sticker and nobody would know which of every problem in the country you're talking about. So, to summarize, at best, even without anything real at stake. Gamification screws with your mental health. At worst, it's a way to manipulate us into treating life like a game, which is also known as being a psychopath. We are often tricked into giving our consent, and even the most obvious and addictive examples of gamification generate billions of dollars, while lawsuits are a speed bump. So what can we as individuals do? Let's look at the gaming motivation scale. Some research shows that if you want to take control of your life, you should make your own choices, do things that make you feel competent, and find ways to feel close to and cared about by others. A simple way to concretely do this is to audit your games or gamified things based on why you play them. If you do something for external reasons, like rewards, virtual money, experience points, or admiration from other players, that is linked to less positive outcomes. That's a job that you hate but need the money. This is when your mom tells you to do something. This is playing esports not out of interest but to win a reward. Imagine your favorite game. Take away any experience points or rewards. If you deleted everything except your memory of having played, would you still play? And if the answer is no, then don't play. Next, if you play because if you didn't, you would feel guilty, worried, anxious, or ashamed. That's barely, slightly better actually, than external reasons, but still not good. Imagine you go to church because you're scared that you'll be hated by your community or you'll burn in hell. Not good, unless you're a little not sex. Anxiety for not playing, this is FOMO. I'm anxious if I don't go on Instagram. I'm restless if I don't hell dive. It's important to recognize if this is why you play and limit it if you can because you aren't actively choosing to play. Daily rewards is an example. Being driven by guilt makes you feel out of control. So what are the positive motivations? Well, if you do something because you recognize you should in order to improve your well-being or achieve some personal goal, you are actively choosing. Choice is good. This is playing to bond with your friends who also play. Maybe Spanish class itself isn't fun, but speaking Spanish is a goal of yours. In fact, education is a great example. You may not like Age of Empires, but if you use it to genuinely learn history, you're better than me. Even better is if you choose to play because you've internalized the reason behind the action. Not what you get out of the act, like a Spanish class to learn Spanish, but rather going to a class because you feel like being an educated person, or going to church not because you'd feel guilty if you didn't, but because it's in line with your personal beliefs, values, or needs. This might be playing a game because you want to be a game designer. It may feel like this is barely different from the previous reasons, but feelings are important. It feels self-endorsed, not just recognizing the personal or practical importance of something, but feeling it itself. For yourself. And finally, there's intrinsic motivation, enjoyment of the thing itself. You enjoy exploring the game universe, or the thrill of improving your skills, or the feelings the game provides. It's the feeling of joy, not a prize at the end. This can be difficult to recognize because I might feel in control by playing RuneScape and clicking on that tree. But what can I then do is say to myself, okay, what is another way I can feel in control? Do I need to feel in control? And that's why none of this means you need to quit your favorite game. You don't. Simply make a mental list of what you play and imagine what you've gained after you're done playing, after you've logged off. Now, there's also not having any reason to play and doing it anyway, but like a learned helplessness thing. But regardless, some might argue that this is taking the fun out of it. That deliberate choice is effort, that you'd rather pick up your phone and not know what app you're going to open, for how long, or what else you'll do. You might argue that predictability is boring, that this is taking things too serious and overanalyzing, and to that I say, welcome to the show. But what I hope you take away from the past 20 minutes is that none of this is unpredictable. Companies earn billions mapping out exactly what you will do the moment you open their app or game. It's never been a mystery, and you gain so little from any of it. Ignorance is bliss, and I'm sorry to ruin that for you, but you couldn't have a conversation about smoking cigarettes if you don't know why you do it or what it does to you. If you don't actively choose what you engage with, it will choose for you. and I would hate to spend a significant part of my life committed to something without knowing exactly what I'm getting into.
I'm here at Twistathon 97, and apparently it's the 30th year of this little game. Flexmeister.
What's your name?
I dare not intrude him. Dennis, now, some beautiful moves there.
Thank you very much. I'm glad
moves.
you enjoyed them. All there's beauty and grace in this game. It's not really a game, it's a way of life, and that's what I consider it.
Flexmeister. Is it Flexmeister, Flexmaster, or Flex?
Dennis Flexman Franklin, World Student Federation Twister Champion.
That's our show. Thank you so much for joining. If you want to learn more, look up self-determination theory and the gaming motivation scale. Please do your own research into any of the things I've said. I just try to make learning relevant and fun. All I ask is if you want to see more content like this, please like, subscribe, and check out the channel.